Welcome back. Tonight's story is about a woman who trained the younger woman her boss was sleeping with to replace her, smiled through 6 months of handoff meetings, and then walked into a boardroom with 3 years of expense reports no one knew she had kept. Pour the coffee. Stay close. My boss spent 2 years hiding his affair inside our budget. On a Tuesday in November, I handed the board the receipts. My name is Diane Halloran. I am 51 years old. I live in a quiet brick condo in Minneapolis, and for 19 years, I was the corporate controller at a mid-sized logistics company off Washington Avenue. The envelope came on a Thursday in late April. Plain white, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of company letterhead with one line typed across the middle. We are excited to welcome Betrayal Voss to the finance team as your transition partner. I read it twice. Then I read it a third time because the word transition did not match anything I had been told. The office smelled the way it always did in spring. Burnt coffee from the break room, wet wool from the coat closet. Somewhere down the hall, a printer was warming up, that low electric hum I used to find comforting. I sat at my desk with the letter flat in front of me, and my hands were colder than the room. I knew before I knew, the way women my age always know. Something I had buried under 19 years of loyalty had just clawed its way back up through the carpet. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from tonight. I want to know who is with me on this one. I grew up in a small river town in southern Minnesota where the church bulletin still listed who brought the hot dish. My father was a county auditor for 31 years. My mother kept the books for a feed store and could find a 40-cent mistake in a stack of carbons. At our kitchen table, you did not raise your voice and you did not raise your hand. But you absolutely did not lose a receipt. A receipt was a promise. A receipt was a witness. My father used to say that paper does not blink. I was 7 years old the first time I heard that sentence, and I have lived inside it ever since. I married once briefly in my late 20s. He was a decent man who wanted a louder life than I did. We parted without lawyers and without bitterness, and I moved to Minneapolis the spring after the divorce with 2 suitcases and a job offer from a logistics company I had never heard of. The company was run by a man named Garrett Whitfield. He was 44 then, polished, easy with a handshake, the kind of executive who remembered the names of the cleaning crew and used those names in front of the board. I was hired as a senior accountant. Within 3 years, I was the controller. Within 7, I was the person the auditors asked for by name. For 19 years, I built the financial spine of that company. I closed the books on Christmas Eve more times than I can count. I sat through 10 years of holiday parties in the same navy dress because nobody was looking at the controller. I balanced through a recession, a fire in our St. Paul warehouse, and the quiet year my mother died. Garrett sent flowers to the funeral home and a card I still have in a drawer. On the card he wrote, "You are the reason this place stands." I believed him. That is the part I have to say out loud. I believed him for 19 years. The warning signs were small at first, the way they always are. A new perfume on his jacket in the elevator, something young and powdery. A second cell phone he started leaving face down on the conference table. A Friday in February when he asked me to approve a hotel charge in Chicago for a conference I could not find on any calendar. I approved it. Of course I approved it. Paper does not blink, but loyal women do. Then in October, 2 Octobers ago, he hired Betrayal Voss. She was 26, sharp, polite, and assigned to my team with no clear job description. He called her my transition partner 6 months before anyone said the word retirement to me. I was 50 years old. I had not asked to transition anywhere. That should have been the moment I understood. Instead, I trained her. It started the way these things start, with a meeting that sounded almost kind. Garrett asked me into his office on a Wednesday afternoon. He had 2 coffees waiting, both the way I take mine, and a soft smile I had seen him use on nervous clients. He told me the board wanted a succession plan. He told me Betrayal was bright, but raw. That I was the only person in the building who could shape her into a real controller, that this was a gift I could give the company on my way out. He used the word legacy 3 times in 11 minutes. I counted later, because I count everything later. I asked when I was going out. He laughed gently, the way you laugh at a child who has misunderstood a joke. Not for a long while, he said. Years, maybe. We just want to be ready. Then he reached across the desk and patted my hand the way my father used to pat the dog. I walked back to my office and closed the door and sat very still for a long time. Something in my chest had gone quiet in a way I did not like. That night, I started a folder. Not a digital folder. A real one. Manila, the kind my father used to keep in the bottom drawer of his desk in the courthouse. I labeled it nothing. I put it in my own filing cabinet at home behind the tax returns from 2009. I did not know yet what I was going to put in it. I only knew that paper does not blink. For the next 8 months, I trained Brielle Voss the way I would have trained a daughter. I taught her our chart of accounts. I taught her how to read between the lines of a freight invoice. I taught her which vendors padded and which ones never did. I sat next to her in a small glass conference room every Tuesday and Thursday morning, and I watched her take notes in a leather planner with her initials on the cover. The initials had been embossed in gold. I noticed because I notice everything. I had given my own daughter, if I had ever had one, a planner like that for her first real job. Instead, I was giving the lessons to the woman who was quietly replacing me, and slowly, week by week, I was learning that she already knew things she should not have known. She knew which expense codes Garrett used for his travel. She knew the name of his assistant's dog. She knew that he took his coffee black on Mondays and with cream on Fridays, because Fridays were softer. She let these things slip the way young women let things slip when they have not yet learned that older women are listening. I listened, I smiled, I poured her more coffee. And every night I went home and I opened the folder behind the 2009 tax returns and I wrote down what I had heard. In the third week of May, I started printing. I had access to every expense report in the company. That was my job. For 19 years, I had signed off on Garrett's travel without a second look, because Garrett was the man who sent flowers to my mother's funeral. Now I went back. 3 full fiscal years. Every Marriott folio, every airline receipt, every Uber, every dinner over $200. I printed each one on plain white paper in the quiet hour between 6 and 7 in the evening, when the cleaning crew was still on the lower floors. I took the stack home in a canvas tote that used to hold my knitting. What the paper showed was simple. Garrett Whitfield had been traveling to the same downtown Minneapolis address roughly twice a month for almost 3 years. The address was a residential high-rise on 2nd Avenue. The Marriott folios were for the suite on the 18th floor. The Ubers, late at night, dropped him off at that building and picked him up before dawn. The dinners were at the same 3 restaurants, always for 2, always charged to a vendor entertainment code that did not exist in our actual vendor list. I had created that code myself 11 years earlier for a client account that closed in 2017. He had been using a dead code to hide a living lie. In June, I matched the dates against Brielle Voss's start at the company. She had moved into that 2nd Avenue building 4 months before her first day on my team. The lease was in a leasing company's name, but the leasing company traced back to one of our own subsidiaries. He had put her in a corporate apartment on the company's dime, and then he had hired her into my department and asked me to train her as my replacement. I sat at my kitchen table that night with the folder open and the porch light on outside the window, and I did not cry. I did not call anyone. I did not write him an angry email. I made a pot of weak tea, and I went back to printing. If you have ever had a man treat your loyalty like a piece of office furniture, he could move without asking. Drop a 1 in the comments. I want to know I am not alone in this. The woman who first asked me if I was all right was the night security guard in our building, a man named Wendell Briggs. Wendell was 63, a retired bus driver, and he worked the desk from 6 in the evening to 2 in the morning. He had a thermos of coffee and a paperback Western on his counter every single night. For 19 years, I had said good evening to him on my way out, and for 19 years, he had said, "Drive safe, Miss Halloran," in return. That was the entire shape of our friendship. One night in late July, I came down with the tote bag heavier than usual. Wendell looked up from his Western and looked at the bag and then looked at my face. He set the book down. He said one sentence. He said, "You have been carrying that bag out of here for 2 months, and I have never once seen you smile. Are you all right?" That was it. One small human question from a man who had no reason to ask it. I was not all right. I sat down in the lobby chair across from his desk, and for the first time in 8 months, I let my shoulders drop. I did not tell him what was in the bag. I told him I was tired. He poured me a cup of coffee from his thermos and pushed it across the counter and said, in the same flat, kind voice, "You do what you need to do, Miss Halloran." Paper does not blink. I have no idea where he got that phrase. I have not asked him. Some sentences just travel. I went home that night and I called a lawyer. Her name was Audrey Lynn. She was 46, and she had been recommended by a woman from my book club whose divorce she had handled in 2019. Audrey met me on a Saturday morning in a quiet office above a bakery in St. Paul. I brought the folder. She read every page. She did not gasp. She did not say, "Poor you." She said, "This is not a personal grievance, Diane. This is a fiduciary problem. The board needs to see this before the auditors do." The board meeting was scheduled for the second Tuesday in November. I went back to work on Monday, and I trained Brielle Voss for 4 more months. I taught her how to roll forward the year-end accruals. I taught her how to talk to the external auditors without flinching. I taught her every single thing she would need to run the department after I was gone, because I am the daughter of a county auditor, and the work is the work, no matter what the men around it are doing. She thanked me at the end of every session. She told me more than once that I reminded her of her aunt. I smiled and said that was kind of her, and I went home and I added another 2 inches of paper to the folder. The new life I built around those months did not look like a new life from the outside. It looked like a 51-year-old woman driving the same Honda to the same parking ramp every morning. But underneath, I was already gone. On weekends, I met Audrey at the bakery office, and we organized the evidence into binders. I started taking long walks along the river with a woman from my building named Marguerite Doyle, a retired ER nurse with a rescue beagle named Hank. Marguerite did not ask what I was carrying. She only asked if I had eaten. Some Sundays, she left a foil pan of lasagna on my doormat with a note that said, "Warm at 350 for 40 minutes. Love, M." I changed nothing the antagonist could see. I did not buy new clothes. I did not cut my hair. I kept wearing the navy dress to the Friday all hands. But in the bottom drawer of my desk at home, the folder had become 3 binders, each one labeled with a year, each one cross-indexed by date, vendor, amount, and location. Audrey had a duplicate set in her safe. The original receipts, the real ones from accounts payable, were locked in a fire safe at my condo. Paper does not blink. In the last week of October, 2 things happened. Brielle Voss told me during our Thursday morning session that Garrett had asked her to start sitting in on-board prep meetings. She said it the way a young woman says a thing she has been told to mention casually. I smiled and said that was wonderful, that she was ready. The second thing was that Garrett stopped me in the hallway on a Friday afternoon and told me the board wanted to honor my service at the November meeting. He said there would be a plaque. He said the word legacy again. I thanked him. I told him I would be there. If you are still with me, take a breath. The next part is the part I have replayed in my head every November since. The second Tuesday in November fell on the 10th. The board met in the long conference room on the 14th floor, the one with the river view and the heavy walnut table that had been in the building since 1978. There were 11 board members, the outside auditor, Garrett, Brielle, and me. I wore the navy dress. I carried a leather portfolio Audrey had given me for my 50th birthday. Inside the portfolio were 3 thin folders. The binders were already in the room, stacked on a rolling cart in the corner, covered with a black cloth. The general counsel, a woman named Patrice Okafor, had arranged for the cart the night before. Patrice and Audrey had gone to law school together. The world is smaller than men like Garrett ever understand. Garrett opened the meeting with his warm voice. He thanked the board for their service. He thanked me for 19 years of loyalty. He used the word legacy on the record this time, and a board member named Harold Pearson nodded the way older men nod at funerals. Then Garrett invited me to say a few words before the formal agenda began. I stood up. I did not raise my voice. I did not look at him. I looked at Harold Pearson because Harold had been on the board for 22 years, and Harold had known my father in passing, a long time ago, in a county I no longer live in. I said, before I accept any plaque, the board needs to see something. I asked Patrice to uncover the cart. She did. 3 binders, 3 years. 1 dead vendor code, 1 residential address on 2nd Avenue, 1 corporate apartment leased through one of our own subsidiaries, occupied by an employee who had been hired into my department 6 months before anyone said the word retirement to me. I did not say her name out loud. I did not need to. Brielle Voss was sitting 4 seats away. Her face went the color of the conference room walls. I turned to Garrett then, only once, only briefly. I said the one sentence I had been carrying in my mouth for 8 months. I said, "You told me paper does not blink. I have just been listening." That was it. No yelling, no tears. I closed the portfolio. I slid the binders across the table to Harold. I walked out of the room. If you have stayed with me until now, thank you. Tell me in the comments what part of the story stayed with you the most. I took the elevator down alone. Wendell Briggs was not on shift that day, but the morning guard, a young woman named Tasha, looked up from her desk and asked if I was all right. I told her I was. For the first time in 2 years, it was true. I walked out the front doors of that building at 11:17 in the morning into a thin gray Minneapolis snow, and I did not look back at the glass. In the car, with the heater warming up and the windshield wipers moving slow, I talked to the 7-year-old girl I used to be at my father's kitchen table. I told her she had been right to listen when he said paper does not blink. I told her that loyalty is not the same as obedience, and that being useful is not the same as being loved. I told her that the men who use the word legacy the loudest are usually the ones writing themselves out of one. I told her she did not have to stay quiet anymore because she had grown up into a woman who knew exactly when to speak. And I told her one last thing, the thing my mother used to say when she found a 40-cent mistake in a stack of carbons. I told her, "Sweetheart, the numbers always come home.